Many thanks for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio broadcasting on 94.9 FM Dakar, Senegal. We are online at WADR.org and across all social media platforms at WADR English. I am Abdullahi Hassan, welcoming you to this edition of WADR's special commemorating the World Press Freedom Day 2026. For the next hour, our panel of three guests will be discussing the theme Journalism Undermined by Multiple Crises. What possible solutions? Now proclaimed in 1993 at the United Nations General Assembly in commemoration of the Windhoek Declaration, an initiative of African journalists which sought to protect independent, pluralistic media, World Press Freedom Day has since been celebrated worldwide to highlight the fundamental principles of press freedom, evaluate global media independence, and pay tribute to journalists who lost their lives on duty. Well, here are some key aspects of the World Press Freedom Day, which include highlighting government's role in upholding their commitments to press freedom, a check on media independence, the role of free media and democracy, and raising awareness of the growing challenges including surveillance, legal harassment, and physical safety threats facing journalists worldwide. Well, on today's specials, I have with me in our Sacred Court studio, Palui Tomasi, Director of the Africa Office of the International Federation of Journalists, IFJ, and the Head of the Federation of African Journalists, FAJ, Secretariat based in Dakar, Senegal. Now, over the past 2 decades, Tomasi has worked extensively on press freedom, journalist safety, labor rights, trade union development, access to information, election reporting, and climate change journalism across Africa. Good to have you, join us, sir.
Thank you very much, Abdullahi.
Very well. Online, we have Zainab Yotunde, all the way from Nigeria, precisely Northeast Borno State. Now, she is a journalist, SDGs advocate, and lecturer at the Broadcasting Department, University of Maiduguri. She covers conflict, humanitarian, gender, health, climate, environment, and development stories for various news outlets, including the national broadcaster, that is the Nigerian Television Authority. Good to have you join us, Zainab.
Thank you.
And of course, I have one last guest online all the way from Ghana, Dominic Lotse. Now, he is the General Secretary of the Ghana Journalists Association, GJA. He is also an editor-in-chief and manager with the Ghana Broadcasting Corporation, where he heads the energy desk covering energy, governance, maritime affairs, extractives, agriculture, and environment issues. Now, over a journalism career spanning more than 2 decades, he has also worked on parliamentary correspondent, regional correspondent, and industrial reporter. Good to have you join us, Dominic.
I'm grateful. Thank you.
Well, very well. Given your vast experience and decades of contributions to media landscape in respective locations, but also having influence on the continental level, I'm happy to have you all to discuss many of the issues that media faces today across the world as we commemorate the 2026 World Press Freedom Day. Once again, Pali Tomasi, good to have you join us.
Thank you, Abdullahi.
Zainab from Nigeria, good to have you join us.
Thank you.
Dominic.
Yeah, thank you, Abdullah. I can hear you.
Very well. Now, just before we get into discussing the theme of this WADR special, I would like to bring us a reminder about some of the trends regarding press freedom, which particularly refers to the report by Reporters Without Borders that says press freedom in West Africa continues to face significant pressure from political instability, military rule, insecurity, economic fragility of media outlets, and increasing legal restrictions on journalism. The report also says global press freedom has fallen to its lowest level in 25 years. With more than half of all countries now classified as having difficult or very serious conditions for journalists. Well, before we all get your contribution on this, let's listen to Veronica Njai's report.
For RSF, press freedom is more than just a media issue, but it is critical to democracy, human rights, and peace building. Sadibou Marong, Director for West Africa at Reporters Without Borders, explains what it means in today's context.
What we are using to define press freedom, which is the possibility given to a journalist to collect and broadcast news without being harassed legally, without economical constraints, without insecurity, given all those aspects.
Beyond the traditional challenges like restrictive laws, economic pressure, and intimidation, Mr. Marong highlights emerging and more subtle methods now used to silence journalists across the region.
Arrest was a pattern, but now in the recent years, the new pattern using spyware into your phone. When you are a journalist and you are arrested, if they take your phone, the first thing is they're going to try to search your sources. This is a very extraordinary pattern. That means if you are an investigative journalist, most of the time, if you are not really physically and mentally prepared, a lot of problems.
The report establishes the Sahel as a major area of concern where worsening security and political instability continue to challenge press freedom. Countries under military rule have seen sharp declines, with journalists facing increasing risks. As the world marks World Press Freedom Day this Sunday, the RSF report serves as a stark reminder that a free and independent press remains essential to building peaceful, accountable, and democratic societies.
Many thanks, Veronica Njai, for that beautiful report. Let me begin right in our Sacred Court studio with Palwi Tomasi. Now, in your view, what would you say is the biggest threat that currently undermines press freedom and independent journalism?
Thank you very much, Abdullah, and thanks for inviting me here on this special occasion to mark World Press Freedom Day 2026. Now, in terms, when we are talking of threats or crises, I think we need to prioritize them. And in doing that, we must look at the implementation of legislations that our governments have put in place with regards to guaranteeing press freedom. Now, in my view, about 2 decades ago, one of the greatest challenges in Africa with regards to media freedom was actually the fact that our laws that guarantee press freedom were not in line with internationally guaranteed standards. Today, as we speak, we can no longer say that. Today, as we speak, one of the greatest challenges is the enactment of obnoxious legislations by our governments to suppress media freedom. Now, secondly, with regards to these laws and provisions that guarantees press freedom, our governments consistently sign and ratify agreements that they have no intention of implementing. Our governments are playing double standards. If you look at the African level, and you look at the work that the African Commission on Human and People's Rights have done with regards to the Declaration of Principles on freedom of expression and access to information. That document, which was adopted in Banjul, I think during the 65th Ordinary Session of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights in November 2019. That document is one of the most comprehensive documents in Africa in terms of provisions that guarantee not only the professional work of journalists, but also the safety and security of journalists, including our rights online and offline. Now, how many...
I love that you said online. I mean, so as far back as 2019, that particular declaration did see into the future of what online could be today.
Exactly. Even going before that, I remember in around 2014, we had a meeting in Kampala, and we were discussing about the legislations, negative legislations that impede press freedom. And we came up with a resolution or conclusion that in future, the legislations that govern the use of the internet or online journalism will be much more severe than conventional journalism. And that is what we are seeing today. Legislations in regards to online journalism have become much more severe. As we speak today, we have more female journalists being attacked online, not based on the professional work that they do, but basically because of their gender.
Their gender.
These are sexist attacks.
Thank you very much.
That intends to discourage them to actually do their duties as journalists.
I'm Palito Masi. I'm happy that we do have a female on the panel today, and she's actually a resident in one of the hotspots in Nigeria where the Boko Haram insurgency has been raging for more than 15 years. And this is where you come in, Zainab. Tell us, first off, as a female, a journalist, an influencer, what are some of the challenges that come attached to your job, especially now that you also have insecurity, spreading across that region, and you also see a form of political instability at least months before the 2027 elections. Zainab, you have the floor.
Well, you're happy having me on the call. I'm also glad that we have somebody from Ghana, because when you take a look at the state of press freedom generally in West Africa, you definitely agree that it's abysmal, especially in Nigeria and other African countries. But then Ghana are trying to some extent, and I'm sure when it's his turn to talk, he will highlight that, because we now have people from Nigeria and other countries seeking asylum in Ghana. So for us in Nigeria, especially the female gender, honestly, it's somehow risky, but we cannot always carry the gender crown on our head. When we want to work, we cannot say this particular job is for the male or this particular job is for the female. So far as you have the expertise, you have the skill, I always say that you have to train and retrain yourself so that you stand out and you know what you're doing, because you cannot allow the other male folks to use your weak points. Maybe like women are for the homes, whereas there are stories that honestly it's the woman that can tell it more, or let me say it's the female that can say it the more. Regarding threat, of course, there are a lot of threats, and I feel it's what the male folks faces on the job is what the female folks faces on the job. For example, there was a time during the time of Burate, there was a time we have a female journalist from Channels,
now,
and then we have
Burate was the former chief of army staff.
Yes,
okay.
Absolutely. Thank you for that.
Okay.
And I have one of my senior colleagues from NTA, Nigerian Television Authority. They both are defense correspondents. So they were attached to the press crew going to one village in Maiduguri and Borno State. And that was the peak of insurgency. While they were there, I'm not sure whether the car is even a bulletproof. It's a normal bus that is used to convey press, press crew bus. We have journalists from Abuja and different parts of the world. So they were going to cover maybe an operation or so. But I usually love traveling with journalists so that they will have the information firsthand, and then they will report it instead of reporting the wrong information in the media and trying to fuel the insurgency. On their way there, there was an attack. Quite sure the women to panic. But then, lucky enough, they have this bulletproof jackets and all of that, so they have to come down from the vehicle, try to lie down flat until the operations were a bit calm. But for Burate, instead of for them to go back to Maiduguri, they had to continue the trip. There is nothing like going back. So it's now up to you. If you say that you will be a defense correspondent or any of the bits, you are covering any of the bits, you just have to make sure that you have the required expertise. Then some of the challenges that some of the female folks face, although I also see that some of the challenges that the male folks face, for example, we have the payment issue. If you are working for a government media, there are certain bits that they don't want you to report. For example, we have state-owned media houses and we have the federal government media houses. Like the state-owned here in Borno, we have the Borno Radio Television. So during the time of election, you mentioned 2027 election. During the time of the election, you only report things of the ruling party. For example, here now in Borno, the ruling party is APC. They will not agree or allow any journalists from the state-owned media organizations to report any other content, whether it's breaking news or anything that is of the public good from any opposition party. Whereas it's not the other way around with private organizations and federal-owned media stations. For the federal-owned media station, we have FRCN, Federal Radio Corporation of Nigeria, and then we have the Nigerian Television Authority. They try to balance it to some percentage that you cover every political party because the public deserve to know. Although there are threats that the journalists may receive. Maybe you're trying to glorify another party. They might even invite you, summon you to warn you. And if you do not desist, they can go to your maybe superior, your boss. Maybe they should suspend you. There is a particular private station that our governor once asked them to seal, but they later opened it. He felt that the private station is attacking him, and it's not that they are attacking him. Had it been I'm the one, because he has a right to reply. He can send one of his commissioners or him himself go there and talk about the issues. Quite sure the issue is there. It's not that the media is reporting it directly. It's the people that are using the media to channel their audios, and then the media is trying to amplify their voices so that the government will hear and then right the wrong. But the government took offense in this regard. They had to seal down the station for some days until maybe when the station apologizes and then they open it. And then the worst that happened is the station manager dismissed the person that was in charge of that program. So those are some of the threats.
Well, thank you very much, Zainab. I love that we're already all building the opening statement from Pa Louis Tomasi, but you also already introduced your colleague, journalist friend in Ghana, Dominic Lodzi. And this is where you come in, Dominic. Tell us, one particular concern here raised by Zainab is that of balancing national security concerns and with the public's rights to information. Now, tell us, Ghana ranks very well according to the latest RSS Press Freedom Index. How can we achieve that?
Thank you very much. We were happy that where rankings came this time round. We have moved almost about 13 points down. And that is something we are happy about. And back to your question, I must say that if you want the issues to be handled and ensuring that national security and the media work hand in hand to promote press freedoms, the most important thing to do is to have engagement. And so when we came into this administration of the Ghana Journalists Association, when we came into office, we took the decision to do a lot more of engagements. And so that has yielded results.
To what extent, Padre Thomas, is economic pressure weakening media independence and professionalism, professional journalism on the continent? Because that seemed to be the case in Senegal, according to the latest Press Freedom Index.
Yeah, if you look at journalism in terms of the economic pressures, now, first of all, you come to realize that journalists are among the most poorly paid in almost every country on this continent. And we are even aware of journalists who work without any form of contracts. They are not on salary basis. And at certain intervals, they don't even receive anything, despite the fact that they deliver services. Now I think one of these issues, or one of the most prominent issues with regards to this, is the limited powers that journalists, unions, and associations have to actually engage media owners and take them on with regards to collective agreements, that is collective bargaining agreements, to be able to negotiate salaries and better working conditions for for journalists. Now, at the same time, you also have to realize that the economic pressure that is placed on journalism or the media is also deliberate, because governments wants to control the narrative, and in order to do this, inserting economic pressure is a strategy from governments to make sure that the media is cornered and that they will actually depend on governments to be able to do certain issues. Because even in terms of importation of equipment, in terms of importation of materials that are needed, there is something called there's an agreement that actually allow countries or the media to actually import these things without placing any form of heavy taxes on them.
So it's not always about the salaries and wages. It goes beyond that.
No, it goes beyond that. Actually, at the level of the state, it goes beyond that, because government wants to control the narrative, and they want to ensure that even independent media or independent journalism is cornered, so that they will be able to direct the narrative. So they are also making sure that certain form of economic pressure are actually placed on the media, for the media not to be able to be very much independent and then broadcast what might be very much critical, or what is supposed to take a whole government to account.
Zainab, let me come back to you, though you heard very well from Opali Tomasi that the way government gets to corner media outlets goes beyond just the issue of funding, right? It's also about taxation and the rest. But you said something earlier about safety, and I think this is critical, though. So what is the intersection of these two, resources and safety? What intersection, and how do they impact the quality of journalism or content or quality reporting now by media outlets, especially given your situation on the Northeast?
Seriously, it does to a greater extent, just that maybe the professionals will understand. Maybe if they don't get paid on time, they will know that. Since, for me personally, I've worked at the government state at NCA, and the last place I worked was a private media outlet. So at the government owned, you get your salaries on time, while at the private, sometimes it gets delayed, like maybe a month, some even go up to 2 months or 3. So the professionals, the veterans will understand that maybe if you are having these challenges, you need to communicate it to your workers, your staff, so that you will know maybe they're not going to receive their salary on time, and then it's due to the revenue you are generating, because we're operating on diesel, because we don't have the power. The power is a Nigerian thing. I don't know whether you're experiencing that in Dakar or Ghana. The power outlet is not like 247 something. You need to get solar backup. Even at that, you need to get your generator on standby, and then the cost of buying diesel. So whatever you generate sometimes goes into fueling, because you don't want to be off air for a minute. You need to buy data and all of that. So at times salaries get delayed, and then some of the remuneration that your staff would get, they might not be able to get it. And what I encourage staff to do is, maybe when you bring a job, you have your own percentage, so that you don't always rely on tips or brown envelopes. That way it will be able to sustain you, and then we kind of motivate staff to work. But at times it's challenging in the sense that when you don't get sponsorship, or when you now go back to the government may feel that he who pays the piper dictates the tune. And I'm the type that honestly I don't want to hear that, because I don't like entertaining that. If you're sponsoring something, this is what you're sponsoring. This is the program synopsis. This is what we're going to do. So you don't expect me, at least maybe if you're doing something wrong, then I shouldn't broadcast it if it's of the public good.
Public interest and national security. Dominic, let me come back to you. Ghana has at least 553 commercial stations, 155 community stations, 31 public stations, 24 campus stations, and 5 foreign public stations. But let's keep away the 5 foreign stations. They can take care of business. How does GJA, the association there in Ghana, which you are, Secretary General, work in collaboration with the government to ensure that the issue of journalist safety and at least salaries and wages are taken seriously to ensure quality broadcasting, quality reporting without any bias or compromise to information integrity?
Thank you very much for the question. Let me start with safety. What we have been doing as an association is to always highlight the need for Ghanaians, for that matter, the government, to understand that the work journalists do, they do it for the development of the country. To that end, it is important that they appreciate what journalists do so that they stop the attacks against journalists. That said, even though we've been advocating safety for journalists, occasionally we have instances where journalists are attacked. When they happen, when journalists are attacked, we make sure we engage the police, the authorities that matter, to bring the perpetrators to book. We always do that, but in most cases, we don't get to the final conclusion where perpetrators are prosecuted or are jailed. In most cases, you get the case getting cold, or we don't get to the final conclusion. So we've been trying to do that, and that is yielding results because we've realized that the police or the law enforcement agencies are not keen in prosecuting or jailing people who attack journalists. So what we have decided to do is to do a lot of engagement for people to understand that attacking journalists is not the right thing to do. It doesn't help in any way. And the work journalists do, they do it under the ambit of the law, and they are contributing to the development of the country. When it comes to the economic issues, I will separate them into two. I'll put them into two categories. You have the private sector, the private media, and the public media. For the public media, you have the state paying some of the journalists. And so in an institution or a corporation like the Ghana Broadcasting Corporation, the state pays the salaries of the workers. But when it comes to equipment or gadgets for the station to work, I can tell you for close to 20 or over 20 years, you don't have the state purchasing or procuring equipment for the station to work with. And so you realize that the stations will get to a point where they will be far behind when it comes to technology. And that is affecting work in most of the state media houses, where the state is supposed to give the equipment for the media houses to work, but the state is not doing that. The state is not doing that because we've realized that most politicians or people who come to power also have their personal stations. They've established their personal stations. So in most cases, you will see that those stations strive when a particular government comes to power, and at the neglect of the state-owned media. And so the funding for state-owned media is an issue. When it comes to payment of salary, that is being done. Even that some state-owned media houses are enterprises on their own. They are supposed to generate revenue and pay themselves. But because of the decline in adverts, some of the state-owned media houses, even though they are state-owned and the government doesn't pay their salary, they find it difficult to pay salaries because the adverts are no longer coming as they used to be. And then when you go to the private sector, most of the people who work in most of the private media houses, the journalists, majority are not being paid properly. Some are even volunteers. They are not on salary. They don't even have contracts. So they work as and when the owner of the station finds something, then he gives them. But there are a few commercial stations that makes some substantial amount at the end of the month, and they are able to pay their workers. So the situation is diverse in Ghana, but generally, journalists in Ghana are poorly paid, and that undermines the work of journalism in this, because if you get up in the morning, you are going to work as a journalist, and you are thinking of your daily bread, what you leave in the house for your household, for your wife and your children, you don't have that. It's very difficult for you to concentrate and do proper work as a journalist. So it is important that that issue of the economic aspect of journalism is looked at. Media viability is an issue in Ghana. A lot of the media houses are not viable because, as you know, we've now moved into the digital world, and most of the corporate entities are now giving advert to individuals on social media instead of the traditional media houses. So it's been difficult for the media houses to break even, and to pay salaries of their workers, of journalists in Ghana.
Well, thank you very much. Palito Mati, this is something that you are very passionate about, of all the advocacy that you do, labor rights. And I think this also covers journalists greatly, because for we to have information integrity, it means that the people behind the processing of that information need to be taken care of properly, so that just a word, sir, that is missing in a report, just the wrong word or the wrong language could be termed misinformation. I mean, which could be deliberate as well. So what has IFJ done and continues to do in this regard across the continent? Let's be specific to the continent, because I know it's big to look at the world where we see it.
Yeah, okay. I will want to touch on a little bit of in terms of the intimidation and harassment that my comrade Dominic have mentioned. Now, let me just add that the issue of impunity must also be seen as a very crucial threat to media freedom and freedom of expression, not only in West Africa, but in the continent in general. Now, we must understand that in terms of intimidation and harassment of journalists, governments are the leading perpetrators, and those who are involved, other civil society or state actors, are also those people who walk along the corridors of power. And this is why, like he mentioned, you find governments unwilling to go to the end to prosecute the perpetrators of violence against journalists. Even when journalists are killed, you hardly see government making the necessary push to ensure that the perpetrators of these heinous crimes are prosecuted. Now, coming back to your questions in terms of information integrity and what the IFJ had done.
Yes, sir.
Now, IFJ had actually tried to set standards in terms of the global charter on ethics for journalism, and it has also been involved in awareness creation of what journalists should do in terms of their profession to enhance quality journalism. Now, with regards to information integrity, misinformation and disinformation, we must look at the political actors and what governments are doing. Most of the time, when you talk about disinformation, it is blankly thrown back to journalists and media workers. But interestingly, governments are involved in disinformation.
Like the case of Sahel.
Not only the case of Sahel. Okay, Sahel is there, and some time ago, people are saying if you go to YouTube and you look at the information that is coming out from Sahel, especially Burkina Faso, you now find it difficult to understand or to have to say with accuracy what is correct and what is not correct, because these things are professionally tailored, and governments are involved. Not only governments within the continent, but even those governments outside the continent who have the power to actually manipulate images and bring them forward to the mass audience, some of whom cannot actually evaluate or discern what is correct and what is not correct. So, in terms of fighting against misinformation and disinformation, this should be the there needs to be involvement from the entire civil society actors. We need to be involved. We need to improve on our techniques of verification, most especially during election periods. Government officials go around and they say anything that they want, some of which are not true. And what does the media do? You have media that will actually follow the bandwagon and just publish what these ministers are saying. Do I need to publish what a minister or a president is saying when I am fully convinced that what the minister is saying is not true? We need to re-evaluate ourselves in this fight against disinformation. We need to re-evaluate ourselves. You know, we do talk more of misinformation, but when you look at it in terms of professional standards, misinformation is basically a human error aspect of communication because it is not intended to deceive. It's a human error. Probably is an information that is not correct, which has been passed on to you by a confidential source, and then you have decided to broadcast it because of that source. But it is not intended to deceive. But what we should mobilize our comrades and officials to fight against is disinformation, because this is pure manipulation, and governments, not only the media, independent media, but governments are also involved in this information.
Okay, then I will come back to you for more on that. But let me go to Zainab. Zainab, just let us understand. I mean, right now you have growing insecurity in the northeast, quite spreading, and it has been reported that millions of people have been killed, millions more displaced, women and children are the most affected. On the back of the Boko Haram insurgency. And I wonder, is there an issue of censorship somehow in play by the federal government and the state government to control the narrative around the reporting of the conflict in that region?
All right, thank you, Hassan. Before I answer that, please, I would like to state two things in relation to what Mr. Dominic said earlier. So there is this concept of meal ticket in Nigeria about like when you work at a private organization, those that cannot pay you, so they will just give you ID cards. You go out, you do your bit, even if you blackmail people with your report, then you get your money in that respect. So they call the ID card. Once they give you the ID card, they call it meal ticket. I don't want to mention the station that did it in Nigeria. Then there is another thing I want to talk about. So instead of now for the private station, I just believe that we need to diversify. We're not talking about media and innovation. Of course, the social media is taking up our jobs, but we still need to think out of the box to think of a way we can sustain ourselves through diversifying whatever we do. So back to your question. Of course, there is censorship. To some extent, I used to tell my staff, or let me say my colleagues, that whatever you do, you first need to sift it. Like what I mean by sift it is, you stop, you investigate, you fact check, you trace your claims and whatever before you dish it out. This way, you are being extra careful of not to glorify violence or do no harm to the public. Then on the government side, there are instances that when you do reports, you see them trying to counter it, that it's not true. And then, for example, at NTA, we usually have our editors, we have our producer, that you pass the reports to them if it's a news report before it's get broadcasted or it get published. So you find an instance of an editor changing the whole thing or trying to suppress the word. Me, as a reporter, I know I have the right to talk to that editor. This is not it. Even if they give you money, you tell me why you are doing it. So when it comes to reporting casualties, they often tell us to play down the numbers so that we don't cause panic among people, or be mindful of the wordings, so that instead of saying maybe Fulani attack Muslim attack Christian, it could kind of fall violence elsewhere or incite hatred. Report it factually, be neutral, and then there is this thing about conflict reporting. There are trainings we had on conflict reporting. So there is a way you report this, not minding their censorship, honestly.
Dominic, just stay there. Hold on. I'll be coming to you in about a minute or two, but I need to come back to the studio here to engage Palu Tomasi. Let's look at Benin and Togo. These are countries in the last 2-3 years we've seen enacted laws that, I think in the case of Togo, to be very precise, or is it Benin, that information to be broadcast have to be approved from a media office that is being governed, overseen by the presidency.
That's the high authority.
The high authority.
Yes.
So in this case, in this context, how does a journalist go about reporting factual information when everything you have to say, from the very first letter to the end, has to be approved by the government?
Now, if you follow what my comrade said, Sadibu Marong from RSF, Sadibu mentioned in the report that was broadcast over your station. Sadibu mentioned about government agents when they pick you up, taking your telephone and or actually taking your computer to search for information.
That's the first thing they do.
Yes. Now you're talking about Togo. Now what has happened in Togo some few years ago, about 3-4 years ago, when they started using a sophisticated software called Pegasus. They don't need to even take your phone. Phones of prominent journalists were hacked, including their laptops. So when you share information, you don't know that they have access to what you are sharing. When you share data from your telephone, you don't know that you are sharing data. You don't know that they are actually getting the data that you are sharing. And in that case, so many people were implicated. I know prominent journalists in Togo who actually have to run out of the country because of the utilization of Pegasus, which was actually designed or developed by the Israeli government. And some African governments are even using it up to this day. It's a serious violation on the rights of journalists because there is no privacy and there is nothing with regards to securing the sources of information that is available to you. Now, coming back to your question about this higher authority that actually controls the content. It is most, they call it HAG.
Higher authority for the visual and communication.
Exactly. And it is mostly in the Francophone countries, especially in West Africa. We've seen it in Niger, Benin. Now, simply put, it is an authoritative system of control. Because if I have to submit a version of my newspaper at least 6 hours or 7 hours before publication, and whatever the higher authority rules out cannot be published, then there is no independent journalism. Like we said earlier, government wants to control the narrative. These are all strategies that are being utilized to ensure that government solely controls the narratives. Like I said recently in an article that I wrote in relation to the Gambia, you might have noticed that in the Gambia there is this law that they want to,
the new policy.
Yeah, concerning the license and registration of journalists.
Yes.
These are mechanisms that they want to put in place to control the media. And it's not only about censorship, because it also, on the side of the journalists, it imposes self-censorship. Because if you look at those rules and regulations, you now develop fear as to what should I say in terms of content. What should I bring forward to the public? Even when it is true, if the higher authority believes that it is offensive to government, you are going to be taken to task. You are going to be charged either falsely or vaguely, and you will have to suffer the consequences. And eventually, journalists will have to self-censor themselves. It's self-censorship. Journalists will go to the extent of retaining information that they have and not sharing with the public.
Is that a trend that is currently playing out in the Sahel?
Oh no, of course, of course. You know, even if you look at Burkina Faso, Niger, if you look at Burkina Faso, Niger, even Mali, there are certain information you just can't pass through. I remember some time ago when our union was actually banned in Burkina Faso, and both the president of the union and the secretary general were actually taken to the front line, and
they were drafted.
Drafted into the army. You know, those are signs of intimidation, because if you are a journalist and you see that, it takes courage for you to go to that length, that same wavelength where those journalists have gone to, and you put yourself at risk in the front line to be picked up.
And this is one question I think I'll be asking all of you at the end of the discussion, that what more or what ways do we have to inspire young journalists to keep doing what we do and maintain that level of standard. But let me come back to you now, Dominic. There is a journalist by name Anas in Ghana. He gained global attention and traction and fame because he got beyond the ordinary to bring to light some very sensitive issues that involved government officials. And I think here now we could say that investigative journalism is one of the many ways that we can really say much to the public, whatever information that they need to have. Can you say something to that, please?
Yeah, you cannot in any way downplay the importance of investigative journalism in the work we do, because we are in a society where every day, every time, people want to hide things. People want to hide behind things, amass wealth, take resources that belong to the state and use them for their personal gains while the people want to be poor. And so you cannot downplay the importance of investigative journalism. But in Ghana, as we speak, the trend of investigative journalism is going down because of a number of things. Mm-hmm. One is that for you to be involved in serious investigative journalism, you need a lot of things. One is you need resources. The other one is that you need to learn the skills. But there have been a number of things that prevent people from getting involved in investigative journalism because I must say, one, they don't have the resources. Two, there have been attacks, and there have been a number of things that people have developed fear, where they think if they are involved in investigative journalism, they can't be killed, they can have all kinds of attacks, and that has prevented a lot of people from to serious investigative journalism, even though there are a few journalists who are doing that. And so what we have been doing is to find ways of funding investigative journalism where journalists can have resources to do that. And then the other one is to engage the authorities to understand that when a journalist engages in investigative journalism, they are doing that to help society, because the state itself has structures that are supposed to be investigating corruption and all that. So, and if you have workers who are being paid and they are not doing that work well, and journalists are doing that to unearth the hidden truths of things happening in the society, it is important for society to encourage them. So at the level, what we've been doing is to encourage the journalists to get involved in investigative journalism, and then the stakeholders to also understand the importance of that work. Now, we talked about censorship. Because of what is happening in terms of the attacks, in terms of when you write stories, the things that you get in terms of people sending you messages, all that, it has resulted in a number of people self-censoring themselves, like not doing that deep investigative journalism, and that is affecting our work.
I think from the start of this discussion, I mean, in the last 40 plus minutes, but Lito Masi, yourself, Zainab, and Dominic, you've all mentioned, you've touched on the need for skills and training subtly, but I would like to begin with Zainab because she is also a lecturer at the broadcasting department in the University of Maiduguri. Zainab, please tell us, what do you think should be, the role of journalism training institutions in preparing young reporters for today's rapidly changing media environment? Because this is something you've all said. The media landscape is changing by the minute. So tell us, what's the role of training institutions? Oh, she's not online. I hope she joins us to respond because she's a lecturer. But Palu Tomasi, you are here with me in the studio. What do you think should be the role of journalism to institutions to prepare young reporters for today's rapidly changing media environment?
Yeah, I think that there needs to be some serious adjustment in terms of what our training institutions deliver now. I remember being in a panel some time ago at the AU Commission, and a journalist lecturer said that what most of us think is journalism, or what most of us have been trained with regards to journalism 20 years ago, is not the same thing that is being encountered now. But in terms of the field in which we operate, I think there needs to be more emphasis on the issue of safety, and at the same time on the need to adhere to the ethics of the profession, because online media itself has brought about changes that we cannot anticipate, or we did not anticipate will happen so fast. And as technology continues to evolve, some of these challenges are growing to an extent that we might not have the means to control or to actually curtail some of the challenges that are already surfacing online. Most especially with regards to online harassment and intimidation of female journalists. I will emphasize that again. I had Zainab. Zainab actually made a comparison between news bits, or what happens between the male and female journalists in the newsroom. I'm not talking about that. I am talking about orchestrated harassment that is designed and specifically targeted at female journalists who work online. And I said before, this is not based on the competence of these female journalists, because they are actually competent, I said that, to be able to deliver. But these are sexist attacks that actually are directed at their professionalism, because they want them to move away from the newsroom. This has been a problem in Africa, where most female journalists are actually moving away from the newsroom, because mind you, in certain countries we have seen that I'm sorry to go beyond West Africa, but we have seen that in Sudan and in Kenya, these targets are taking a new dimension, because they don't only target you as a journalist, they also target your family. So that your family can also insert pressure on you to leave the profession altogether.
And that's why now we see a trend of journalists who report on issues but anonymous, or there's this change to their first or last name.
Yes, exactly. You're talking of you talk of Anas. We'll not delve into that much, because we know that most of those people who talk about Anas, we are not even sure whether that's his name, but he's been doing a fantastic job in most especially in exposing corruption in Ghana.
And I really hope or wish that we have enough time at hand to discuss the issue of the Gambia, because Gambia also is entering, in fact, has entered an election cycle, and just then we hear about this new policy, which is a cause of friction now, or tension between the government, the office of the Minister of Information, and the press union.
Yes.
And so at this point, I think this is where we want to. We've understood now that yes, the media landscape is undermined or under threat. But what are the solutions? And this is my question to you, beginning with you, Palu Tomasi. At this point, do we call for reforms or policy changes, or pressure governments to respect constitutional provisions that have existed for years, allowing for free media practice in our respective countries?
Now, if you look at the media landscape in West Africa, let's take West Africa. almost every government is talking about media reform. Almost every government. But what are they doing? They're not doing anything as far as the basic or top priorities for reform are concerned. And that goes with regards to the implementation of the laws and conventions that they have signed and ratified, which guarantees press freedom. Now, look at the Gambia, for example. In this day and age, you are talking of registering and licensing journalists in 2026. You are even talking of scrutinizing content that will come on social media. That if you have a large following, you need to register. Why? We are talking about freedom of expression online. Now, this goes beyond what is actually legislated. How do you monitor, or how do you place a check on a Gambian who is outside the shores of the Gambia, but have a huge audience in Gambia? Are you going to cut him or her off completely? You see, these are all fears that government create. Most especially if you have to understand the Gambian context, in the fact that it is an election year, and you are talking of a government that has already been accused by the media of not doing anything to stamp out corruption in the country. Recently, the Nigerian Broadcasting Commission also came out with severe warning concerning journalists who actually insert personal opinions.
Yes, that's true.
In programming. Now, if we know the content of the news, in terms of the news, we don't include our opinions. But how can you have a program and you as an anchor or I as an invited guest to share expert view, how would you not expect me to insert my opinions into this?
Based on assessment.
Based on the assessment.
And observation.
And observations within even within the context of the frameworks that guarantees press freedom. Now, I always argue that if you look at our constitutions, most of our constitutions, especially with English-speaking West Africa, Anglophone West Africa, most of our constitutions with regards to freedom of expression and media freedom have clawback clauses. There is a giving aspect and taking back. Yes. Now, but if you look at the international conventions, and I will go back to the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights, which most of our countries have signed and ratified, then you also look at the Declaration of Principles. These things are concrete. These things are finely woven. They are among the best regulations in terms of media freedom that we have seen so far. But what do? Our governments do not demonstrate the political will. Everything goes back to government again. Because if you say I respect press freedom, and you still legislate laws that repress media freedom, then there is something wrong. And that is why we even have to look at the way we model and label the Press Freedom Index. Because most of the time we look at, we place so much emphasis on the issue of journalists who have been arrested, the number of journalists who have been arrested, the number of journalists who have been intimidated or beaten, or the number of journalists who have been imprisoned or jailed, and even the number of journalists who have been killed. But we also need to reflect on the laws that govern media, journalism in these countries. And where a government has actually failed to bring its laws in harmony with existing laws that actually govern press freedom, then I don't think you deserve to score any good point.
Wow,
thank you. As far as press freedom is concerned.
Thank you very much, Pauli Thomas. This word, harmony, wow, this is the core, the base of our discussion today. Thank you very much. Harmony, it's very much needed. Coming to you, Dominic Lodzi, to wrap up this interesting discussion that I wish for us to have for as long as it takes to really understand the threats and challenges that the media ecosystem faces today, but sadly or unfortunately we don't have that much time. Dominic Lodzi, you heard from the studio guest here, and if anything I took from that statement for me, which is my takeaway from this conversation, is the need for harmony, balancing the media practice and of course the constitutional provisions. But let's hear your take on practical measures now that will guarantee media safety, safety of journalists, and a good enabling environment for media practice, not just in Ghana but across West Africa and the continent. Dominic.
I would like to start from where Mr. Tomasi left off, where he was talking about the laws. It is important that we have our legal regimes reformed so that we'll have journalists protected, and then we end the impunity against journalists. The laws are there. I am happy Mr. Tomasi talked about the fact that have the laws. We've signed
Hello, Dominic. Your network again.
Laws that we have to respect. Important thing.
Excuse me, Mr. Dominic. Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, you can just.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, you can just start again, please. In between, we lost you. If you can just start again, please, from.
Okay, so
yes.
I was saying that I would want to start from where Mr. Tomasi left off, where he was talking about the legal regimes. And number of treaties and protocols that we say that we would abide by. So it is important that we have our laws falling in line with those international treaties that we've signed on to. So it is important that we have reforms to ensure that journalists are protected, and then we end the impunity against journalists in West Africa. The other thing I would want to touch on is the fact that we need sustainable funding models for independent media, because the states will not give the money. And it has, for decades, the states have not been supporting media development and retooling of the media houses. So we need sustainable funding models for independent media in Africa, for that matter, West Africa, so we can have the journalists do the work that is expected of them. The other one I would want to add is the fact that our unions, our associations, we need to strengthen them. We need to work together across borders to strengthen each other so we can be our peers and then work together to ensure good environment for journalists to practice in West Africa. The last one I want to add is the fact that we need to have multi-stakeholder collaborations. Let us not limit ourselves to just the media. There are civil society organizations that believe in press freedom, believe in media pluralism, believe in all that we do. Let's work together with them so they can also support our cause and ensure that the journalism that we practice yield and gives results for our society. I think that is what I would want to add in terms of the practical things that we need to do. It is a tall order. It is a tall order, something that will be difficult to do. But if we take the first steps, we take the needed steps, we'll get there.
Thank you very much, Dominic Lodzi, Secretary General of the Ghana Journalists Association. Thank you very much for being a part of this special edition, this special production by West Africa Democracy Radio to commemorate the 2026 World Press Freedom Day. But just before I let you go, briefly, in 30 seconds, please, what message would you like to share with young journalists entering the profession at such a challenging time?
What I would say is that what we learned in journalism class years back is not what is happening now. And so we would first entreat the training institutions to change curriculum. They should change curriculum to fall in line with current trends so that the journalists they are training would be honed properly, would be trained properly for the current and coming generation. To the upcoming journalists, what I will say is that this work we do is a calling. Just like the pastors are called to preach and to give sermons and to bring the people to Christ, that is also what we do, is also a calling. And so when you enter into it, you must be dedicated, you must be devoted, you must have that commitment to be in this field, to work for the country or the continent. It is important that you understand that this job is not a job that is paying in terms of salary, but it is rewarding in terms of you getting results for your country. So let's work, and let's not let the money be the number one agenda to come into the media space, but for us to work for society to change for the better, for us to work to get people who are corrupt to get the resources that belong to the state, go to the right places for us to also benefit, for the generations to come to benefit. Because if we fail, we are failing generations yet unborn. It is our duty to work to ensure that the resources that are in our country benefit everyone.
Thank you very much, Dominic Lottie from Ghana. Unfortunately, the only female panelist on today's discussion, Zainab Yetunde Adam from Northeast Nigeria. She joined us from the start of the program, but she could not make it to the end, and all attempts to reconnect with her has failed. But then we still say much thanks, express our gratitude to her for being a part of the discussion. Back to the studios, Palu Tomasi. You are the director of the Africa Office of International Federation of Journalists, IFJ, and also the director of the African Federation of African Journalists, FAJ, in Dakar. It is a lot on your shoulder as we speak to ensure that the media profession, or journalism as a profession, continues to thrive, and that the media ecosystem as a space of professionalism remains protected and safe. Overall, you've said a lot. We've assessed many of the threats and challenges that journalism and journalists face today, and we've also looked at some of the solutions. But what would be your message to a young journalist or aspiring journalist intending to enter this profession at such a challenging time? Same question.
Difficult one. but I will just read the same sermon from Dominic. And journalism is a calling, and you need to have the passion for journalism to be able to go beyond certain lines, to be able to deliver. Because whatever you deliver, you are delivering in terms of enhancing or defending the fundamental rights and freedoms of the general citizenry. That's what we do. Unfortunately, we have very few people. We as journalists, we have very few people who defend our rights. But then we stick our necks out, even for lawyers and for doctors, who demand fees when we need their services. But this is how it works. And you need to be, as a young journalist entering the profession, I would say you need to be very much committed. And you need to know from the beginning that there are going to be huge challenges. Because I'm not saying you are going to fight against the state, but then you come to realize that at most instances you will be at parallels with the state. Because the state, most states, especially here in West Africa, have huge skeletons in their cupboards. And when you want to report on issues concerning corruption, which is a cancer in our societies across the region, when you want to report on gross human rights violations, domestic violations, gender-based violence, poverty eradication, other health issues. Our governments are taking a lot of money and spending it on the military as compared to education, health, and other things. And interestingly, development cannot leave the media behind, because the media has a role to mobilize the citizenry for development. The media. You can't have development where the people are not even aware of what you are doing in terms of what they want. So the media must always be utilized and match hand in glove with relates to development initiatives. But then, going back to your question, for young journalists who are entering the profession, there must be that dynamism, that passion, that you are coming to work for the service of humanity, especially the citizenry that you work for. Now, secondly, we are talking about changing the curriculum. Journalism institutions also need to start including the issue of unionism in their curriculum. We need this. Both safety, the issue of safety. We did not have this opportunity. When I studied journalism at the University of Nigeria in Nsukka, we didn't have the opportunity to learn anything about safety or trade unionism. But these are essential principles that young journalists must learn, because it's the union that defends your fundamental rights as journalists. Governments are not interested. In fact, the Declaration of Principles states that governments must defend journalists' rights and their safety, which actually has been re-echoed from the UN Plan of Action for the Safety of Journalists. But our governments do not do that, because they want to control the narrative, they want to expose you, they want to know that, they want to ensure that you are vulnerable, so that they will be able to cow you and utilize you the way that they want. So young journalists must be ready, must be prepared, and they must be able to be members of their unions and be prepared to do whatever that their passion has directed them to do.
Well, thank you very much, Paulo Tomasi, Director of the Africa Office of the International Federation of Journalists, IFJ. Thank you very much for being a part of the discussion. Thank you very much,
Abdullah.
And to you, our listeners out there, especially if you are a journalist, you today from the discussion understand what you have to do. Passion is the key. And with you being ready and behind the microphone or the camera, or having that magic tool, the pen, in your hand, you are surely an agent of change. That's what we need to do. That's what we need to keep. We need to continue to be to change the narrative today around poor governance, corruption, economic inequality, social injustice, and all other issues that affect our great continent, Africa. I'm Abdullah Hassan. Once again, you'll be listening to West Africa Democracy Radio, a special production on the 2026 World Press Freedom Day. We are live online at WADR.org and continue the conversation on our social media platforms, X, Instagram, and Facebook at WADR English. It's a bye for now.